The Great Migration is one of nature's most spectacular events, but it can also turn into a terrifying tragedy. Millions of wildebeests cross rivers and plains in search of fresh grazing, guided by instinct and survival. This year, swollen rivers and unexpected floods turned the journey into a deadly test for countless animals. Wildebeests charged forward, unaware that rushing waters were about to sweep them away in an instant. The roar of rushing currents mixed with panicked calls filled the air as animals struggled desperately. Predators watched silently while chaos and survival collided in one of nature's harshest displays. Villagers and tourists could only watch as a wave of life and death rolled through the plains. The migration that once symbolized strength and endurance became a scene of heartbreak and loss. Stay with us as we reveal the full story of the wildebeests swept away during this catastrophic migration. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss more incredible stories from the wild world. 1. The dawn that turned deadly. As the first rays of dawn stretched across the plains, thousands of wildebeests began their march toward the river, unaware of the looming disaster. Mist hung low over the savanna, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of wet earth after overnight rain. The herd moved as one, hoofs pounding the ground, creating vibrations that echoed across miles of open land. Calves stumbled through dew-laden grass, elders guiding them with instinctive authority, unaware that safety was fleeting. Predators lurked at edges, watching carefully, yet even lions and hyenas seemed cautious of the river's hidden dangers. Dark clouds gathered upstream, water levels rising silently, yet the herd's attention remained on instinctive migration cues. Trunks swung, ears flared, and eyes scanned the path ahead, every movement synchronized in ancestral rhythm. The thunder of hooves merged with natural sounds, creating a living pulse across the plains, a rhythm of survival and anticipation. The river, usually a place of life and water, shimmered under early sunlight, hiding dangerous currents and slippery banks. Some wildebeests paused, sensing the unusual smell of earth and water, yet urgency propelled the majority forward. Young calves hesitated near elders, learning navigation through instinct and experience as panic subtly began to build. The air smelled of wet mud, grass, and distant water, carrying both reassurance and latent danger across the plains. A sudden gust of wind stirred the herd, alerting animals to subtle environmental cues, yet the march continued. The herd's massive numbers created a wave of movement, leaving trails of churned mud, broken grass, and hoof prints. Sudden cries of a few stragglers echoed faintly, their distress signals lost in the collective march of the massive group. 2. The river that devoured lives. The river, swollen from heavy rains, churned violently, currents stronger than memory or instinct could predict. Wildebeests approached its edge, hoofs slipping in muddy banks, unaware of the treacherous waters waiting below. Some animals paused, testing footing, yet survival instincts urged the majority forward, compelled by the migratory rhythm. Currents swept violently, pulling weaker calves under, their desperate cries drowned by the rush of water. Adults attempted protective formations, but sheer force of the river disrupted coordination, scattering the herd in chaos. Bodies collided, hoofs struck, and panic spread as animals struggled to stay upright against relentless water pressure. Predators at river edges watched with cautious curiosity, some stunned by the sudden upheaval of normal hunting grounds. Debris floated along, branches and mud mixing with terrified bodies, amplifying the river's deadly grip. Mothers tried to nudge calves forward, but panic and exhaustion rendered even the strongest momentarily helpless. The herd's instinctive crossing became a battle against invisible forces, a dance with fate few could control. Some wildebeests slipped into currents and were swept downstream instantly, lives extinguished in seconds of panic. Water roared, foam surged, and splashes created chaos, leaving survivors disoriented and struggling to regroup. The river seemed alive, devouring both young and old, indifferent to pleas, cries, or heroic attempts at rescue. Even strong adults fought to maintain footing, muscles straining against currents far stronger than anticipated. 3. The panic that spread across the herd as chaos unfolded at the riverbank. Panic rippled through thousands of wildebeests like wildfire across dry grass. Trunks swung wildly, hoofs stamped rapidly, and bodies collided, amplifying confusion and fear throughout the herd. Calves squealed, mothers trumpeted warnings, and the collective stress created a tense, chaotic atmosphere impossible to control. Predators hesitated, observing, sensing weakness, yet also intimidated by mass panic, unsure how to exploit disorder. The herd fractured into smaller groups, each responding to instinct rather than coordinated movement, survival overriding unity. Some adults attempted to guide calves, yet even experienced elders were swept up in disorganized motion. Eyes darted constantly, ears flared, tails flicked, creating a symphony of fear and response across muddy plains. Water splashed over the riverbanks, carrying struggling bodies and debris downstream, heightening urgency among survivors. The herd moved in waves, surging forward and backward unpredictably, instinct overriding conscious thought at every step. Collisions were frequent, limbs struck, and minor injuries multiplied as panic drove animals to survive individually. Thunder in distant clouds amplified reactions, echoing trauma from water struggles and feeding further agitation. Predators, once opportunistic, waited, observing signs of weakness, yet the herd's panic deterred direct attacks initially. Calves pressed against adults, trying to navigate through mass confusion, learning survival under extreme stress. Every sudden movement triggered further panic, a chain reaction cascading across thousands of terrified animals. 4. The calves who could not escape. Young wildebeests struggled to keep pace, hooves slipping on muddy banks, bodies weaker than adults in current's grasp. Many were swept away instantly, bodies engulfed by river, leaving a tragic absence in the herd structure. Those who clung to adults felt immense pressure as currents pulled, creating tension between protection and inevitable loss. Every panic-driven surge further endangered calves, separating them from mothers and older siblings in seconds. Trunks touched trembling bodies, trying to lead calves to safety, but sheer force of water overwhelmed instinctive guidance. Observers noted calves' vulnerability, relying entirely on adults' protective abilities, yet sometimes fate proved unstoppable. The river became a relentless conveyor, selecting randomly, showing no partiality to age or strength. Calves that survived displayed signs of trauma, fear, and heightened alertness, learning instant lessons in mortality. Even moments of calm were fleeting, as every splash reminded them of recent near-death experiences. Young animals huddled together when possible, trunks intertwining instinctively, a natural attempt at emotional support. Some floated temporarily on debris, surviving by accident rather than strength, illustrating the cruel unpredictability of nature. Calves' cries echoed over water, the sound amplifying adult distress, increasing overall herd tension. 5. The predators who lurked near. Lions and hyenas observed cautiously, watching for signs of weakness among struggling wildebeests near river edges. The chaos provided opportunity, yet predators hesitated, wary of massed adults and turbulent waters. Vultures circled above, keenly observing both survivors and deceased, preparing for inevitable scavenging opportunities. The panic of the herd amplified predator strategies, offering glimpses of vulnerability without direct engagement. Predators adapted instinctively, calculating timing, distance, and risk as currents claimed young and weak wildebeests. Survivors' defensive formations deterred attacks temporarily, trunks and hooves forming barriers against opportunistic threats. Some predators approached cautiously, testing water edges, yet instinct prevented rash actions in overwhelming numbers. Every struggle in water was both life and death lesson, observed carefully by carnivores learning and adapting behavior. Predators' patience reflected understanding of herd instinct, waiting for natural selection to thin ranks before engaging. Even small mistakes by calves or weakened adults were exploited immediately, emphasizing survival pressure. The savanna ecosystem responded dynamically, predator and prey adapting to sudden environmental challenges. Predatory animals showed remarkable restraint, blending observation with strategic decision-making. The river became both hazard and hunting ground, shaping interactions between species and influencing natural selection. 6. The herd that tried to regroup after crossing. Surviving wildebeests attempted to regroup on safer plains, assembling fragmented groups cautiously. Trunks touched, ears flapped, and bodies nudged each other in instinctive attempts at reassurance and organization. Adults guided calves and weaker members, slowing movement and pausing to allow recovery from trauma and exhaustion. The landscape bore visible marks of chaos, trampled mud, churned grass, scattered bodies, and disturbed waterholes. Social structure was temporarily disrupted, older leaders missing, forcing younger adults to step into protective roles. Calves pressed against survivors, seeking guidance, reassurance, and emotional stability amidst trauma. Regrouping required attention to terrain, predator presence, water availability, and remaining herd numbers. Each step forward involved careful observation, instinctual teaching, and learned caution from immediate experience. Behavioral adaptations became evident, with new pathways, safe zones, and protective patterns emerging rapidly. Adults displayed empathy, adjusting pace to accommodate calves' fear, exhaustion, and learning. Herd cohesion relied on nonverbal cues, trunk touches, vocalizations, and synchronized movements to maintain unity. Even minor disturbances caused heightened alertness, as trauma reinforced perception of danger and environmental sensitivity. Groups formed smaller sub-herds initially, merging cautiously to maintain safety while recovering from rivers' effects. The plains' visual cues guided movement, safe footing, water, and predator awareness shaped paths and assembly points. 7. The aftermath that scarred the plains. Bodies of swept-away wildebeests littered riverbanks, mud, and shallow waters, creating a stark, grim reminder. Decomposing carcasses attracted scavengers, altering predator-prey dynamics temporarily across the ecosystem. Mud churned by panicked hooves and water surges marked every crossing, a physical testament to chaos endured. Vegetation was flattened, trampled, or washed away, leaving long-term environmental scars visible for months. Surviving wildebeests paused frequently, showing trauma through hesitant movement, scanning, and protective behaviors. Water quality declined briefly, carrying debris, bodies, and organic matter downstream, affecting fish and aquatic life. Predator and scavenger interactions intensified, utilizing altered landscape to secure sustenance efficiently. Observers documented ecological disruption, noting changes in animal behavior, migration, and feeding patterns. Calves and adults learned new survival routes, avoiding dangerous river crossings in subsequent migrations. The plains echoed with absence, the silence of lost herd members palpable even amid ongoing movement. Community members and local guides recorded events, integrating disaster lessons into local knowledge bases. The storm and river's aftermath reinforced importance of awareness, caution, and adaptive strategies for survival. Recovery was gradual, with water receding, vegetation regrowing, and the ecosystem slowly balancing again. 8. The lessons for future migrations. Surviving wildebeests adapted, learning to recognize river conditions, currents, and early warning environmental cues. Elders guided calves and younger adults, teaching safe crossing points and cautious herd movement for upcoming migrations. Observation of predator presence and behavior influenced group decisions, reinforcing caution and strategic navigation. Social structures adjusted, with temporary leaders emerging to maintain cohesion and reduce panic during stress events. Behavioral changes included slowing near water, prioritizing safety over speed, and protecting calves more actively. Natural instincts were sharpened, with memory of disaster shaping vigilance, environmental awareness, and herd coordination. Researchers and conservationists used lessons to monitor migration paths, predict risk zones, and guide herd movement. Survivors' actions demonstrated resilience, adaptability, and learning capacity even under extreme environmental stress. Calves learned survival skills through observation, instinct, and adult guidance, embedding disaster awareness early. Migration timing and route selection became more deliberate, reflecting learned responses to seasonal hazards. Predator interactions informed survival strategies, balancing caution and opportunity for both prey and carnivores. 9. The community that observed the disaster. Local villagers witnessed the river tragedy, eyes wide with shock at nature's overwhelming power and unpredictability. Children and adults alike observed the massive herd struggling, some emotionally affected, unable to comprehend scale. Villagers shared stories of disaster, creating oral history that would inform future generations about river dangers. Guides noted patterns of panic, herd behavior, and calf vulnerability to educate tourists and wildlife enthusiasts. Local rangers responded, documenting conditions, assisting if possible, and monitoring predator activity. Community discussions emphasized respect for wildlife, preparation for seasonal migration, and river crossing hazards. Photographers captured dramatic scenes, raising awareness and empathy for the fragility of life in nature. Observers noted behavioral shifts in surviving wildebeests, learning lessons about herd dynamics and trauma. Education programs integrated real-life observations, emphasizing environmental stewardship and disaster preparedness. Stories of loss and survival were shared widely, highlighting the importance of human-wildlife coexistence. Community members reflected on limits of human intervention, understanding unpredictability of natural forces. Villagers used disaster as opportunity to teach children caution, empathy, and awareness of wildlife behavior. Local leaders integrated observations into conservation strategies, including early warning systems for rivers. The event became a cultural lesson, illustrating resilience, adaptation, and environmental respect. Humans witnessed both awe and sorrow, learning humility in the face of nature's immense power. Eyewitness accounts documented behavioral learning, herd movement patterns, and ecological impact. Community involvement strengthened response to future events, enhancing safety for humans and wildlife alike. The plains story became part of human knowledge, bridging understanding between animal behavior and natural hazards. Villagers developed practical solutions to minimize risks during migrations, including safe observation points. The disaster became a shared memory, shaping attitudes toward wildlife, rivers, and the unpredictable force of nature. 10. The psychological impact on survivors. Surviving wildebeests exhibited trauma, heightened vigilance, and altered movement patterns for weeks after the river crossing. Calves were especially sensitive, clinging to adults, displaying hesitation near water, and reacting to distant sounds of flowing currents. Adults adapted protective strategies, slowing pace, maintaining close proximity, and reinforcing guidance for younger members. Instinctive behavior was sharpened, with risk assessment and environmental awareness heightened by prior losses. Social dynamics shifted temporarily, elders taking stronger leadership roles to maintain cohesion and calm. Memory of swept-away members influenced herd decision-making, survival, and route selection during subsequent migrations. Predators adjusted strategies, noting cautious behavior among survivors, modifying hunting approaches accordingly. Water crossings became deliberate and strategic, with herd members prioritizing safety over speed or instinctive drive. Observation of danger, recognition of risk zones, and avoidance of hazardous areas reflected collective learning. The herd displayed signs of psychological resilience, yet trauma remained visible in posture, vocalizations, and movement. Calves learned early lessons in fear, caution, and herd cooperation, imprinting survival knowledge for life. Physical recovery was intertwined with behavioral adaptation, demonstrating interconnectedness of mind, body, and instinct. Environmental cues such as river depth, current speed, and terrain were integrated into future decision-making. Researchers documented behavioral shifts, emphasizing psychological effects of natural disasters on large mammal populations. 11. The struggle for survival after crossing. Surviving wildebeests regrouped, struggling to regain strength on muddy riverbanks scattered with debris. Adults supported exhausted calves, trunks guiding them while nudging and reassuring an instinctive protection. Some individuals collapsed, trembling from exertion, shock, and trauma, highlighting the immense toll of the disaster. Bodies were slick with mud and river water, reflecting the chaotic struggle endured during the deadly crossing. The herd attempted to reform its social structure, elders leading cautious paths to safer grazing grounds nearby. Predators lingered at distances, observing, yet wary of defensive formations and coordinated herd movements. Calves clung to adults, learning survival strategies from the immediate recovery, imprinting lessons for life. The plains were littered with hoof prints, churned mud, and flattened grass, marking paths of both panic and endurance. Vocalizations echoed across the river valley, soft trumpets signaling reassurance, alarm, and social cohesion. Water holes, now muddied with debris, reflected the aftermath of disaster, providing scarce drinking options. The herd's movement slowed, careful assessment of terrain guiding decisions, prioritizing safety over instinctive speed. Elders adjusted leadership roles temporarily, ensuring protection of weaker members and calves during recovery. Behavioral adaptations emerged, including coordinated nudging, strategic pauses, and protective clustering for survival. 12. The emotional bonds that persisted despite chaos and loss. Surviving wildebeests displayed remarkable emotional bonds, staying close to family and herd members. Adults surrounded calves, using trunks, nudges, and vocalizations to reinforce security and reduce panic. Separation anxiety was evident among young wildebeests, emphasizing social learning and dependency on elders. Even amidst physical exhaustion, adults maintained protective formations, instinctively shielding vulnerable individuals. Calves responded to vocal cues, learning which movements, sounds, and positions indicated safety or danger. The herd exhibited subtle signs of mourning for lost members, pausing near carcasses and observing quietly. Vocalization served multiple purposes: reassurance, instruction, and alert signals for potential predators nearby. Physical contact reinforced emotional bonds, trunks entwining, heads nudging, maintaining cohesion under stress. Survivors demonstrated empathy instinctively, ensuring that calves and weaker adults were prioritized during movement. The plains reflected a duality: chaos from disaster and nurturing care reinforcing herd resilience. Bonded pairs and family units remained intact despite widespread panic and loss, showing instinctive social memory. Trauma reinforced group cohesion, teaching collective caution and adaptive behavior for future migrations. Even minor disturbances triggered protective responses, showing long-lasting awareness shaped by emotional memory. Social structures re-emerged gradually, older adults reassuming leadership roles, guiding decision-making carefully. Calves learned observation and imitation, internalizing adult strategies for survival in unpredictable environments. Emotional intelligence guided recovery, reinforcing communication, protection, and collective learning within the herd. 13. The predators who capitalized on chaos: lions, hyenas, and crocodiles observed carefully, noting weakened, separated, or young wildebeests near river edges. Opportunistic hunting increased as the disaster created temporary vulnerability, altering predator-prey dynamics. Crocodiles lurked in the water, snapping opportunistically at calves swept downstream, highlighting natural risk factors. Lions and hyenas coordinated subtly, striking only when herd dispersal created exploitable gaps in defensive formations. Predators' behavior reflected strategy and patience, waiting for signals of weakness while avoiding adult protection. Survivors demonstrated increased vigilance, trunks extended, ears flared, constantly scanning for danger. Predators also learned from the chaos, adjusting hunting techniques to altered herd movement and behavior. Juvenile wildebeests experienced selective pressure, surviving adults adapting to minimize predation opportunities. 14. The scientists who studied the disaster: wildlife researchers arrived post-tragedy, documenting both mortality and adaptive behaviors among surviving wildebeests. Data included river conditions, herd numbers, calf survival rates, and predator activity patterns. Researchers took detailed notes on trauma, behavioral adaptations, and social cohesion observed after the river crossing. Soil and water samples provided insights into environmental factors contributing to increased danger during the migration. Calf mortality, adult injuries, and herd responses were recorded to better understand large mammal resilience under stress. Predator behavior during chaos was carefully noted, including timing, strategy, and response to herd defensive formations. Scientists observed regathering patterns, documenting leadership, protective strategies, and learning in post-disaster recovery. Behavioral shifts were analyzed for implications in long-term herd survival, teaching, and migration strategies. The plains' ecological changes were recorded: trampled vegetation, disrupted water quality, and changes in predator-prey dynamics. 15. The morning that followed: wildebeests exhibited morning behavior, pausing near deceased herd members, touching bodies with trunks, and vocalizing softly. Calves pressed close to survivors, seeking comfort, guidance, and safety amidst trauma and environmental chaos. Adults lingered near fallen members, demonstrating empathy, social awareness, and instinctive responses to loss. The plains were marked with silence, interrupted only by soft rumbles, trumpets, and gestures of concern among survivors. Social bonds became more visible, as survivors clustered, coordinated, and reassured one another in post-disaster recovery. Even predators observed from a distance, sensing unusual herd behavior reflecting loss and vulnerability. Vocalizations conveyed grief, protection, and emotional connection, reinforcing cohesion and care for the living. 16. The regeneration of the plains: vegetation slowly began to recover, sprouts pushing through trampled, waterlogged, and churned mud. Water holes cleared, debris dispersed, allowing survivors to drink and regain strength after exhausting river crossing. Scorched and flattened areas reflected environmental trauma but also provided lessons in herd navigation and risk. Small mammals cautiously returned, learning from absence and signs of prior chaos, resuming normal activity gradually. Bird populations observed cautious resettlement, reclaiming areas vacated during disaster to resume feeding and nesting. Elephants, zebras, and other species gradually returned to plains, interacting cautiously with surviving wildebeests. Predators adapted, adjusting hunting and scavenging strategies to new landscape conditions and herd behaviors. Survivors' movement patterns shifted, integrating memory of danger zones, safe paths, and alternative crossing points. Human observers recorded recovery, noting regrowth, behavior adaptation, and ecological balance restoration. New vegetation provided grazing opportunities, supporting energy recovery and social interactions for surviving wildebeests. Riverbanks stabilized, mud and debris receding, creating clearer paths for future migration and herd movement. 17. The lessons learned for conservation: the tragedy emphasized need for mapping high-risk river crossings and flood-prone plains for migration safety. Monitoring technology such as GPS tracking and river sensors was proposed to predict disaster risks during migrations. Emergency response strategies were developed for wildlife, including early warning alerts and temporary safe zones. Community involvement increased, reporting observations, assisting recovery, and participating in preventive measures. Policy reforms encouraged habitat preservation, safe corridors, and environmental risk management along migration paths. Education programs taught local populations and tourists about herd behavior, river hazards, and wildlife empathy. Behavioral studies provided insight into how trauma shapes herd adaptation, teaching survival lessons across generations. Adaptive conservation strategies aim to protect both wildlife and ecosystem function during extreme natural events. Monitoring and planning reduced future risks while preserving instinctive behaviors and social structures. Coordination among ecologists, meteorologists, and conservationists emphasized integrated disaster preparedness. Early warning alerts and safe route planning were proposed to mitigate mass mortality events in future migrations. Public awareness campaigns highlighted the emotional and social intelligence of wildebeests, promoting empathy and support. 18. The global awareness that followed media coverage spread worldwide, showing the peril, chaos, and heroism of wildebeests during river disasters. Dramatic videos and images illustrated the immense risk faced by migratory herds, eliciting empathy globally. International organizations highlighted species' vulnerability to floods, storms, and environmental hazards amplified by climate patterns. Social media campaigns educated millions about migration risks, herd behavior, and natural disaster impacts on wildlife. Documentaries incorporated real footage to teach conservation lessons, resilience, and ecosystem fragility. Research articles raised awareness of the impact of unpredictable weather and river conditions on large mammal survival. Global audiences debated intervention ethics, human responsibility, and limits of wildlife rescue during disasters. Conservation charities used attention to fund safe corridors, monitoring technology, and habitat protection initiatives. Education programs leveraged media to instill understanding of herd dynamics, environmental awareness, and empathy in youth. Scientists collaborated internationally, sharing insights on natural disaster mitigation and behavioral adaptation of migratory herds. Policy initiatives in affected regions gained global support, emphasizing early warning, preparedness, and habitat management. Public attention encouraged responsible tourism, observation ethics, and respect for natural migration phenomena. Awareness campaigns highlighted social intelligence, protected behaviors, and emotional complexity of wildebeests. Global documentation prompted research funding, habitat preservation efforts, and educational outreach initiatives. The event reinforced the urgency of proactive conservation, disaster preparedness, and sustainable environmental stewardship. 19. The community that responded. Local villagers, rangers, and guides were deeply affected by witnessing massive losses during the river disaster. Communities organized observation, assistance, and documentation of surviving wildebeests to support conservation efforts. Stories of struggle, survival, and loss were shared orally, creating cultural memory and awareness of river hazards. Rangers documented herd behavior, panic, and regrouping, using insights to guide tourists and enhance wildlife safety. Human empathy increased, fostering support for protective measures, safe observation points, and local conservation initiatives. Education campaigns emphasized understanding herd behavior, environmental hazards, and disaster preparedness for humans. Local leaders coordinated with conservationists to implement monitoring, early warning, and habitat management strategies. Villagers reflected on limits of human intervention, respecting nature's power while supporting survival when possible. Community-based learning emphasized vigilance, protective observation, and preparation for seasonal river crossings. Children learned early lessons about wildlife empathy, safety, and natural disaster unpredictability. Cultural practices incorporated disaster memory, teaching practical safety and ecological awareness for future generations. Photographers, guides, and volunteers contributed to documentation, education, and fundraising for wildlife protection. 20. The legacy of the Great Migration tragedy. The river disaster became a symbol of the peril, resilience, and adaptability of wildebeest migrations across Africa. Survivors adapted behaviorally, socially, and psychologically, teaching future generations about risk, coordination, and survival. Conservationists incorporated lessons into planning, safe crossings, monitoring technology, and community engagement strategies. Educational programs highlighted natural hazards, herd behavior, instinct, and empathy for both wildlife and human observers. Policy reforms included habitat connectivity, early warning systems, and management of high-risk river crossings. Global awareness campaigns ensured long-term attention to migratory species, disaster preparedness, and ecosystem preservation. Scientific studies examine trauma, behavioral adaptation, herd cohesion, and predator-prey dynamics post-disaster. Calves and younger adults learned instinctive survival, protective strategies, and cautious movement, shaping future herd patterns. Human communities incorporated disaster memory into culture, awareness, and practical safety measures during migrations. Documentation and research ensured tragedy informed long-term conservation planning, ecological understanding, and education. The riverbanks, plains, and herd behavior became living lessons in resilience, adaptation, and natural disaster survival. Natural scars on the landscape served as reminders of both loss and the persistence of life in harsh environments. Global attention reinforced urgency for conservation funding, habitat protection, and protective measures for migratory species. Herd instincts, social cohesion, and emotional intelligence were recognized as critical components of survival strategy. Observations guided intervention strategies while respecting instinctive behavior, balancing protection and natural selection. The Great Migration tragedy left scars on the plains and hearts of those who witnessed the disaster. Countless wildebeests lost their lives in the floods, a reminder of nature's power and unpredictability. Survivors continued their journey, but the memories of those swept away lingered like a haunting echo. This catastrophe reminded humans how fragile life is even for the most resilient creatures on Earth. Conservationists and scientists now monitor migration routes more closely to prevent future tragedies. The event served as a stark lesson about the balance between life, survival, and natural forces. If this story moved you, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life wildlife encounters. Share your thoughts in the comments because your voice brings attention to the wonders and dangers of nature. The wildebeests may move on, but the lesson of their struggle will remain forever etched in memory. Thank you for watching and stay connected for more stories that show the beauty and terror of the wild.